Chapter 150, Heart to Heart. When she got up to school the next morning, Zhang Xunning's eyes were slightly red and swollen. Others naturally saw it, but they only thought in their hearts that she didn't know what she said to the eldest princess of Liang when she went to Mingfeng Palace yesterday, so she didn't dare to ask more. Fang Miao almost didn't get up. The palace people on Yang's his eyes side pinched the hour to dig her out of the warm quilt. After she washed up indiscriminately, she came out top-heavy, and saw Zhang Xuning standing quietly under the porch outside, so she cried a sad face, "Was I drunk last night?" Zhang Xuning smiled and shook her head. She was relieved. Zhou Baoying was very surprised next to her. "Did you drink last night?" Fang Miao rubbed her head and said, "Her Royal Highness the Princess called to drink, and also celebrated the birthday of the second girl Zhang by the way, but I can only drink it along." Yu saw it and laughed sneeringly beside her. There was no wind or snow last night, and this morning in the east, thin clouds covered the glazed tiles in the palace complex. It was a rare good day. Going to school is still in the Fengshan Hall. Everyone walked along the long road in the palace. Most of the others are familiar with each other these days, walking in front and whispering without a match, speculating about what the gentleman will talk about today, and what the Protestant Go test will be. Zhang Xuning walked behind, listened for a while, and was absent-minded for a while. It's just that when she turned a corner and arrived at the palace road in front of the Fengshan Palace, Chen Shi at the front couldn't help but sigh, "Isn't that the person who is serving around the saint? Why is he here?" Zhang Xuning followed the voice and looked up. It turned out to be Zhang Bao. "I haven't seen him for a few days, and after he was promoted by his master, the eunuch Wang Xinyi, he seemed to be getting better in the palace. The dark green robe he was wearing was new, and he also held a dust whisk in his hand. His lips were red and his teeth were white, and his appearance was delicate, and he was frowning lightly and looking at the direction of the east side hall, and asked the little eunuch standing in front of him something. The little eunuch replied a few words, bowed slightly, and went to the side hall. Zhang Bailai was upright, and when he turned around, he saw the people who came over here. In front of Cunning Palace in the past, everyone watched Zhang Bao being punished, and was saved by Shen Zhu, the king of Linzi. Later, I heard that one of his eunuchs in the harem had the ability to go to the emperor's side to serve, and I was secretly surprised for a while. I couldn't help but be a little surprised to see him here." Zhang Xuning also had doubts in her heart. Before everyone could ask more, Zhang Bao was thoughtful, looked at their eyebrows and eyes, and had already guessed probably, and took the initiative to say, "Last night, Mr. Xie discussed with the saint and several elders until late, stayed in the palace, and slept in the side hall of Fengshan Palace. The saint didn't want to disturb him early in the morning, but he presented a few tricky things to him, and he had to go to discuss, so he had to come and disturb his dreams, so he invited him to go. It turned out to be a thank you." That's right. Zhang Xuning still remembers that in the previous life, Xie Wei stayed in the palace late when he had something to do, and when he stayed in the palace after the palace gate, he was almost always in Fengshan Palace. One is close to the emperor's dormitory, which is convenient for timely listening to the summons, and the other is close to the Wen Yuan Pavilion, so if there is a lecture, it is also convenient to go. When everyone heard Zhang Bao's words, their doubts in their hearts were suddenly resolved, and they all saluted him, passed by him, and entered the main hall of Fengshan Hall to wait for the gentleman to give a lecture. Zhang Xuning walked by with her eyes and nose, and did not look at Zhang Bao more. After waiting in the hall for a while, Shen Zai came followed by several palace people. It's just that she didn't come early. As soon as she glanced at Zhang Xuning and smiled, Sun Shu, a doctor of Kuaza supervisor, came. Zhang Suiwei asked someone to find her 2 chess books to read, saying that during her absence, her husband began to teach Go, and it was true. Sun Shu's 10 Classics of Arithmetic has already been talked about for a small time. Compared with other gentlemen, he is still a young man, although he is not a bookworm, but he is addicted to arithmetic, and he put on a posture to tell them, and many things in this world imply the way of arithmetic. For example, in Go, it seems to be more thoughtful than whom, but in fact, it is more than whose brain turns faster and calculates longer. Zhang Shui would never have expected this one. The game of Go was not good, and he hadn't been there for a few days because of the Tongzhou incident, so he didn't know what he was talking about earlier. Although people sit honestly in the temple, frowning and listening to the lecture seriously, their minds are still like a mess of mush. If you don't understand, it's easy to get distracted. Her position happened to be by the window, so she was bored and naturally looked out and deserted. Unexpectedly, not long after she wandered out of the world, a figure in a pale blue robe burst in from the left side of her field of vision, startling her. Xie Wei choked on the charcoal gas of the fire in the imperial dining room last night, coughed, and when he returned to the side hall, he tossed and turned all night and did not sleep well. The little eunuch came to invite, and he got up. The complexion is not very good. It's just that his complexion hasn't been particularly good since the beginning of winter last year, and others can't see it. After a little washing, he came out of the side hall. At this time, the lecture in the main hall had already begun, and the voice of the doctor of arithmetic who was talking about Go came from inside, and he couldn't help but subconsciously glance over there when he heard it. As a result, this glance actually made him see Zhang Xuning. The window sash in the cold weather was half hidden, her pink and white slap face was embedded in the crack of the window, her palms supported her sharpened chin, and a pair of ordinary pupils showed a little dullness, and she didn't move for a long time. It's clearly deserting. When Xie Wei saw it, his steps paused, and his brows were already frowning. Zhang Xuning was far away from him, but the moment he stopped and looked at her, he already felt a chill on his back, shivered, and didn't know how to turn his brain, so he stretched out his hand and closed the window sash. The view was cut off. It's just that this sudden sound couldn't help but alarm Sun Shu, who was talking about Go in the hall, and when he saw Zhang Xuning by the window, he couldn't help frowning. What is Miss Zhang Er doing? And all the people looked at her. Zhang Xuning smiled and explained, it's a little cold when the wind blows outside. After all, she sits on the tuyere. Although Sun Shu was slightly dissatisfied with her making a disturbance during her lecture, he didn't say anything, turned his head and continued to speak. Zhang Xuning listened for a while, and saw that Sun Shu didn't pay attention to herself, so she leaned in again and quietly opened a crack in the window sash. Outside the hall, the eaves corner, the light is full of jade steps. But there is no trace of Xie Wei. I think Shen Lang is still waiting for him, and he has no time to stop and worry about these little things. Why don't you allow people to go to school and desert? Zhang Xuning muttered so in her heart. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that she was reasonable, so she put her mind at ease. Unexpectedly, the school in the morning was finished, and someone came to invite her in the afternoon. It was the little eunuch who had seen him before who was serving in the Fengshen Palace, and he hung his head respectfully and said to her, Mr. said that the second girl Zhang has not entered the palace for several days, and her homework should have fallen behind a lot, so let you go over in the afternoon, and Mr. will take the school examination. Zhang Xuning was suddenly mourned. His feet were filled with lead, and he moved back to the side hall of Fengshen Hall step by step, and when he entered the hall, he saw that Xie Wei was already sitting behind the familiar bookcase, holding a thin pen in his hand, and writing a letter. She stepped forward to salute. Xie Wei didn't raise his eyelids, and the pen in his hand was also flowing smoothly without lagging, and he only asked, Tongzhou has been playing blindly for a few days, and his heart is wild, and he doesn't even listen to his schoolwork when he returns to the palace. Zhang Xuning said wrongly, I listened to it today. Xiaowei's long fingers turned slightly, and he took out a seal from the box next to him, took the time to look at her, and said lightly, listen to when the flowers outside will bloom and when the snow will melt, so that you can go out and let loose the wreckage. It shouldn't be, she shouldn't have deserted and was caught by Xiawei. Zhang Xuning put her hands behind her back, her fingers tightened. After thinking about the hand that Xiawei had beaten, and listening to his words, wandering bones seemed to mean something. She couldn't help but remember that she had spoken to Xiao Dingfei on the way to Sinaing Palace yesterday. For fear of being turned over these accounts, she didn't dare to talk back, and only buried her head. Xiawei stamped the seal on the fold of the note, closed it again, and called the little eunuch outside to come in and hand it to the cabinet. When I turned around, I saw Zhang Xuning stuffy like a quail, and I couldn't help but feel bored in my heart. This look is not the slightest bit lively. He looked at it for a long time, and suddenly said, You don't understand what Sun Shu said. Zhang Xuning suddenly raised her head to look at him in surprise. Xiawei said, It's strange that I can understand the hall that has been missing for many days. It's not hard to guess. Zhang Xunning's surprise was not that he guessed this, but that he was willing to guess this. After all, it seemed that she was going to ask her about desertion, but once she wanted to say I don't understand, it had nothing to do with her. Xiawei didn't even look like he wanted to be investigated. She blinked, a bold idea sprouted in her heart, and said tentatively, Master Sun's speech is boring, and the students can't keep up with him even if they rack their brains. I heard that Mr. Piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting are all great talents, why don't you teach me? These words first trampled Sun Shu under his feet, and then lifted Xiawei up, which could not be more clearly touted and flattered. Xiawei felt that if she had her past temperament, she must have frowned and told her to correct her attitude. After all, Sun Shu is not a mediocre talent. Just seeing her obediently standing in front of him with her hands behind her back, her dull eyes when she deserted in the window in the morning were full of agility, like a reindeer who had never seen a person by the forest stream, and she didn't feel a lot easier. The corners of his lips stiffened for a moment, and finally drew a slight arc, and said, You are such an unlearned person, and I don't know what kind of trick I made. He got up and sat down in front of the window and set the chessboard on the table. Zhang Xuning hit the snake with the stick, and immediately said, Mr. is so good, and then sat opposite Xiawei. She found that Xiawei was a real person who ate soft and not hard. As long as he didn't fight with him with thorns, it was always easy to coax him. No, this is Xiejuan, who kills people without blinking. She really ate the gall of a bear's heart and a leopard, and she dared to use the word coax? Either or not. It's time to be respectful. Zhang Xuning was startled by the word that popped up in her heart, and pulled back the idea of her deviation in time. Xiawei put the chess box next to him. He was dressed in a pale green robe, with dark cloud patterns rolling on his sleeves, like pine waves and clouds, and sat under the window. Playing chess requires calculation, and it is indeed a law. It's just that if my generation talks about Go, I talk more about potential. Xiawei did not reject Sun Shijiao's set, glanced at her. Su felt that the girl's family liked white, so he put the box of white seeds on her right hand. Calculation is a technique. If you can get the potential, you will be able to achieve the Tao. Zhang Xuning looked at the box of chess pieces. Unexpectedly, he raised his eyes, but found that the 5 fingers of Xiawei's right hand were slender, which was very good looking, but the knuckles in the middle of the ring finger were wrapped in a thin silk cloth, faintly revealing the fragrance of a little ointment. Then a thought turned in her head, remembering that she saw him with a wound on his hand when she was in Tongzhou, but she couldn't remember where it was, which finger, so she said, "Is the hand injury of Mr. still healed?" Xiaowei went to take the fingers of the chess pieces and beat them. His natural eyes lifted, his lips straightened, and he looked at Zhang Suining opposite, and didn't speak for a long time. Zhang Suining was drumming in her heart, inexplicably feeling a little chill in her eyes, her lips squirmed, and she wanted to say something, but she didn't dare to speak. There was a palpitating silence for a long time. After all, Xiaowei retracted his gaze first, and didn't pay attention to her question at all, as if he hadn't heard it, and continued the previous words, "You can play soldiers on the Go board, and what you fight is your mind. The chessboard is like a territory, and the chess pieces are like soldiers. Since ancient times, water can carry a boat and also overturn a boat, and the gains and losses of a sun may be insignificant. Therefore, the chess player should be guided by the situation, such as governing the people and controlling the water. If you can understand the knowledge on this chessboard, whether you are a person or do things, you will not be confused to such a situation." Being a man and doing things, confused to such a situation? Zhang Suining felt that he had something to say. But she didn't know much about Xiaowei, and she didn't know what she had done wrong, so she didn't dare to ask if this demi-saint was ridiculing her stupid head. And Xiaowei's words suddenly reminded her of Shen Zai and his relatives. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. It's not the first time Zhang Suining has heard this, and she knows that it is a sentence that is often said in the court, but she has never taken it too seriously. However, Xiaowei said that playing chess is like governing the people and controlling the water, but it made her think. It must be known that the reason why Xiao Shu was able to suppress her in the previous life was that in addition to growing up in the big clan in Beijing since she was a child and being well informed, Zhang Suining pondered in private, afraid that she had learned a lot of things when she went to study in Fengshen Palace, and it was accumulated over time. Now, people like Xiejuan are in front of their eyes. She picked up a chess piece, rubbed it lightly with her fingertips, her eyes flashed, and said, "Are people and chess pieces the same? The chess pieces are played by the chess player, but the human heart has one, and it grows in its belly. Playing chess can play chess pieces, but people's hearts have to say that they can play." Xiaowei remembered the words of the little eunuch back and forth last night, and now he just wanted to take off Zhang Suining's beautiful head and put it on the chessboard, telling her to reflect on herself, but she didn't care about what she asked, and only answered indifferently, "Heroes make the times, and the times push heroes. Although it is unpredictable to turn people's hearts, they are also afraid of heroes. If you don't think carefully, others will fan the flames a little, and your heart will go with the trend, so what's the difficulty? In fact, people's hearts are worse than this chess piece. When a gust of wind blows, the chess pieces can still stand still, but when a few words are blown, people's hearts will always be fluctuating." Zhang Suining closed her eyes and had a hidden understanding. Some things always have to be useful in order to make people humble and diligently learn. She learned it today, and she was very serious. Xiaowei answered her questions and talked about chess for an hour and a half, and she thanked her respectfully. Because of the thoughts in his heart, he didn't notice Xiaowei's thoughtful eyes when he left. "I left Fengshen Palace, pinched my fingers and counted the hours, and waited on the way to Sinaing Palace, and after a while, I saw Xiao Dingfei come out. She deliberately hit the front palace and walked on the road. Xiao Dingfei saw that she was alone, thought for a moment, and after walking out for a while, he turned around to find Zhang Suining under the pretext that something was left in Sinaing Palace to find it. It's getting dark. Zhang Xuning stood in the corner of the palace wall, didn't talk nonsense, and said straight to the ground, Ding Fei Shizi has been in the market for many years, you should know some people, right? I have something I want you to do. Xiao Ding Fei's handsome long eyebrows suddenly raised. He didn't shirk at all, and asked directly, what's the matter? Zhang Xuning asked him to come over with his ear, and said this and this, so and that. Xiao Ding Fei was puzzled when he heard this, what do you want to do? Zhang Xuning said, you just say that you can't do it. Xiao Ding Fei laughed, where could he lose face in front of the beauty? Patted his chest and said, this matter is wrapped up in me, but it's just. Zhang Xuning looked at him, what? Xiao Ding Fei scratched his head, if there are too many people, you have to spend some money. Zhang Xuning frowned, counted all the money in her hand in her mind, and remembered that there were still tens of thousands of taels of silver in Xie Wei's hands, and she didn't feel a little worried. It's just that the brain turns another corner, and the eyebrows are flattened again. Yu has been raising it for a long time, and it is time to find a chance to slaughter it. She laughed and said, it's easy.